Hey everyone, this is David Benites from Renesans and Extreme Vocal Institute, and you're watching Gym Rock Crew.
David Benitez, welcome to Gym Rock Crew.
Thank you for having me.
You've worked and toured with artists from Motionless in White, right? Daughtry, Black Veil Brides, Asking Alexandria, Deadlands, Escape the Faith, like a whole list. And you also joined Will Ramos on stage.
I have, yes.
It's freaking awesome. So you've got this long career in the metal scene, right? As a vocalist as well as a vocal coach. So could you tell us a little bit more about Extreme Vocal Institute?
Yeah, absolutely. I love what I do here. I am a vocal coach. I specialize in the world of extreme vocals and everything across screaming and singing with a lot of heavy distortion. Although I do teach lots of regular middle of the road kind of singing as well all over the board. I work with many different artists that you'll see either on the radio or on different festivals, on tour all the time. I'll be in the studio with people sometimes working on their albums with them, helping to make sure all the vocal takes are the absolute best that they can possibly be and that everyone's feeling good about it. I'll help people at home and on tour. I also work with plenty of people just starting out. I kind of work with anybody that needs help and that wants guidance. And that's really what Extreme Vocal Institute is. Between me teaching people one-on-one as much as I can, teaching on tour, helping people with our very expansive YouTube channel, and then even more expansive, our online program called EVI Now that we're gearing up to celebrate a big anniversary for. We try to help people in as many ways as we can, and I really love being able to do it.
Love that. So
Thanks.
I think I've had Mara Lysenko. I don't know if I've had any other vocal coaches there, so you're probably the second one.
Very cool.
Yeah. All right. So I heard that you are a former powerlifter slash bodybuilder. Why former? Are you not doing that anymore? What's the scene there?
With that whole world of things, that was a very wild period in my life. And I've never really been able to talk about that in this kind of setting. So I'm excited to be on here with you today. I was pretty heavily involved in a bodybuilding and powerlifting combination team for a number of years called Next Level here in Massachusetts. And what the premise was being able to physically build up the strength to be able to and the size and the overall shape and have the know-how and work on it together, have all the workouts be in the gym together, everyone on the team, and be able to come into a bodybuilding competition and take a good number of the top spots, all us, and then be able to, because of the way the training was being done, then turn around and then enter a strongman competition all together, still having that kind of more bodybuilding shape, and yet place very, very well everyone on the team within that as well. And the difference in the mentality for the training for what we did with that team compared to what it typically is for doing one or the other was really, really cool. And my favorite thing about it was really the team element, in that so often, and I'm sure you know this, with different kind of modern day, more gym-based kind of physical activity stuff or any sort of competition thing, it's so focused on the individual. And sometimes that can be really isolating. And I loved being able to do this with a team. And I've taken so much of what I learned from that period of my life, and I've incorporated it into so much of what I do on a day-to-day and into the way I teach too.
Yeah. And it's surprising because there's a lot of very successful businessmen who just swear by the gym and kind of learning how to build routine and habits because of the gym. So it just translates to so many aspects of your life. So that's it really builds your mindset, right?
Absolutely, yeah. And it can be tough, especially for touring musicians, people that own their own business, people doing so many different things, because the amount of time during the day can be limited. And with what I do know about these different worlds of physicality and physical training, it definitely demands a certain amount of time per day. and per week that sometimes just isn't possible. So that's why I like to kind of focus on other elements of that, or like take it in small doses, more or less, in terms of like how much of that training I kind of put in. And I like to really, especially on tour, be pretty adamant about getting in that bit of physicality per day, and whether I put it into things where my knowledge from the lifting world of things comes from, or in the last few years, the way I've kind of pivoted and kind of become a bit obsessed with things in the world of things like calisthenics and different things in terms of just other kinds of athleticism overall. And now I've kind of taken a dive into the Pilates side of things, and just how much more physically demanding that is than I was anticipating.
It's tough, yeah.
And it's really cool. And continuing to be passionate about these things and staying on top of them has been a big factor in keeping my voice really, really healthy and in really great shape too. And just the mind to body connection of everything too.
Cool. So are you still lifting, like, or you're just putting like a few elements, you've just taken a few elements and then you're mixing it up?
In the last couple years, I've kind of gone on and off with that. I just recently, in the last few weeks, started to incorporate more like weight stuff in again. Because sometimes, like especially on tour, it's not always possible to get to a gym, depending on the level of band you're in, depending on like the budget you have, or if you're working multiple positions. So for me, where I'm responsible for not just myself, but a lot of other things on tour, there isn't always time to like get to a gym or the space to be able to take the amount of weights that I would want or need to kind of do certain things. So I like to be able to kind of just go right outside the touring vehicle, like right outside the venue, be able to work out more or less outside, calisthenic wise or otherwise, to be able to still get in the same amount of physical work, expend that kind of energy, and then benefit in a very similar way, but kind of doing it on the fly and in a more kind of condensed amount of time. That's definitely something I always look forward to in the mornings on tour when I can, being able to kind of escape for a moment, get that movement in, and then come back and then be able to enter everything with a really fresh mindset because of feeling good about what I just did.
Love that. Yeah, and I know like a lot of musicians have come on you and said that they just it's just the consistency of just getting up and going in the morning, getting that out of the way, it just kind of sets the mood for the whole day. So yeah, I totally get that. So what like general good nutrition and like exercises help with like screaming?
Definitely cardio is an important element that I think a lot of people skip over, because there are many people in like the touring world of things that for like however many years they don't realize how important it is to take care of themselves, and then it hits them and they start to kind of make that transition, and people will go very typically into like the weightlifting side of things and go pretty hard there. And although yes, that is incredibly beneficial, like I was saying, to the mind body connection, and in terms of managing tension and different things like that within the throat, within the body, so much of the job of being a front person in a band, and so much of the job of performing like this, is more of that cardio element, especially depending on the type of performer you are. Like for me, when I'm on tour with Renaissance, I move around a lot. And even when I'm doing guest vocals with, like you were mentioning, like because I've done stuff like this with Lorna Shore or Motionless in White or so many other different people that I've worked with and continue to work with, like there's a lot of movement on my end, and I try to help a lot of other people to that as well. And then beyond that, and the oxygen management as well, when you're doing such a laborious activity, because even if you're just standing there, you're burning through your body's resources, you're burning through things in terms of like what you've taken in nutritionally during the day to work all of these muscles within the vocal tract and do all of these things. So having a good cardio base, having generally good just core strength, is so crucial to being able to not just like have a healthy voice and not to just scream and sing well, but to be way more in charge of what all of these things mean.
Yeah. And then when you say cardio, like what kind of cardio are we talking?
For me, I like to incorporate different elements of athletics, and I haven't really been able to talk about this much, but I had open heart surgery when I was 6. That was pretty intense. And for a while there, growing up, that kind of kept me from doing any sort of physical activity, getting kind of cleared for anything growing up. And then by the time I started to kind of be good to do that, I was so like head first into the things with music that I kind of missed out a lot of that growing up with this sort of element. So I'm really only within these last few years of adulthood really taking the dive into athleticism now. And when it comes to the cardio side of things, for myself, I like to do many more kind of things based on like athletics. Like when I'm home, I like to get on the bike. I'll ride out to like a football field somewhere. I'll do lots of drills on the football field back and forth, just using the yards to be able to kind of train myself in as many ways as possible, like sprints back and forth, different kinds of like more so more complicated movements throughout the body, different things in terms of like jumping distance, jumping height, being able to work on like different elements of explosive movement for myself. When I'm helping other people with this, I know that there aren't going to be many in the touring circuit or otherwise that are going to want or need to take it as far as I do. Because that's more purely for my enjoyment and my self interest to kind of see what's possible and push the boundary. A lot of it that I'll prescribe for others is just even walking a certain amount per day, getting a certain amount of steps per day, because it's so easy on tour to just sit in the green room and just be on your phone all day. I'll have people like get into running, even like minimally on a somewhat regular basis, just to put their body under that certain amount of stress while still having to manage your oxygen well to be able to get through it. So, like, those are the kinds of things, at least on a minimum level, just cardio wise, that help as a vocalist. But, and I love to experiment with this myself, you can really take that as far down the rabbit hole as you want, and things are only going to help you. Like, the more you do with your body, naturally, the more you're going to be able to do with your voice, since that's just another part of you.
Yeah, I love that. So on show day, then how hard are you going? Like how hard would you recommend someone like doing any kind of exercise or cardio?
In that regard, I guess there is a limit if it's also like the same day. And I have some people I work with where they'll do a run in the morning that I've been having them do, or I know some people in some bands where they'll go and do like a whole hour or hour and a half lift, not that long before set, because it kind of helps them get in the zone. It helps them to be able to kind of maybe let go of anything else they've been holding on to physically or just thinking about mentally before getting on stage, before getting into the rhythm of the show. It's kind of different for everybody. It's based on what your own physical endurance is. It depends on what level of physically active you are on average. I would say roughly on the same day as a performance, typically keep physical activity to maybe about an hour's worth, maybe a little less, because you want to make sure that you don't use everything you have in the tank before you're going to play your set. Or you at least want to make sure that there's enough time that you're able to refuel, you're able to
Yeah.
eat a balanced meal, and you're able to reset and recharge before getting on stage and needing to expend energy again. Because for
Yeah.
some people, like my friend Sven in the band Aborted, typically will like wear an Apple Watch on stage, and I want to do this to see not only if I can match it, but if I can beat it. That he'll sometimes burn like 1,000 calories on stage during a set. That's intense.
Whoa.
That's a lot of physical work. That's a lot of output. That's a lot of energy that you need to have going into it. And I know different like drummers and other kinds of musicians that will burn kind of similarly on stage with just like the pure tenacity of how they perform. So I would say to try to keep that physical activity to about an hour and make sure to prioritize having that window between the physical activity and when you get on stage.
Cool, makes sense. What is really interesting is that I had Dave Mustaine's coach on here, Reggie. And
Ah,
yeah, and he actually did this little experiment where he put like watches on and just to see how many calories they were all burning. And he said it was like roughly around 400 calories like for a set. And his reasoning, which kind of makes sense, is that their bodies have adapted to those movements, and so the bodies get really good at just burning calories in the sense that you don't burn a lot of calories because you've learned how to control that movement. Does that make sense? Like they've adapted.
yeah, definitely.
Yeah,
Depending on the amount of movement happening. And that's
yeah,
definitely different depending on the style of music. Like depending on like if you lean more on the rock side of things, if you're more on the progressive music side of things, there is definitely a difference in stage presence in terms of how much movement left and right, how much running around versus how much of the act of the performance is stationary makes a huge difference. That and for that reason, a lot of times, like when I'm working, say, with someone in a hardcore band, I'm having to lean a little more into the physicality of it because I know they are going to be running around a lot more than the average performer versus someone leaning up more on the rock side. Or let's say if I'm working with someone that's doubling as a guitar player as well, yes, the cardio is important and yes, the physical health is important, but it's also knowing that they're not going to be using nearly as much energy because they're going to be mostly when they're especially while they're vocalizing they can't really move around because the mic's in one place. So
yeah,
it's definitely a very different thing for every individual, and that's a big part of what I love about this and what I love about helping people with their voices and kind of like we're talking about here, just helping them manage their own physical person because that's really what this is all about at the end of the day. And I love that it's a
yeah.
totally different case with every single person that I work with, and it definitely keeps it interesting.
Yeah, I'd love to know what, I mean, your watch says at the end of a set. Let me know how many calories you burn if you ever
Oh
try
yeah,
that.
I don't even know. I just keep. I never remember to actually do it. I gotta track that at some point because I'm so curious.
Yeah, that would be cool. So, what would you say are the three like essentials that every vocalist should carry with them on tour?
Three essentials to carry on tour for any vocalist. I think that in the vocal world of things, and you'll know this. I think this is very similar in the fitness world of things. I think that there's a lot of companies and a lot of products out there that really like to push the idea that there are certain things that you have to have when you actually don't. And it's kind of in a pretty predatory way. Like a lot of these different things where the marketing behind it, the way it's pushed, kind of creates this idea oh, you can't do this job without this, like all the different kinds of like protein shakes, the creatines, all the different kind of pre-workouts, like how all the different kind of supplemental things that exist around gym culture, athletic culture, and that's so similar on the vocal side of things. It's so similar on the front person side of things. And if I had to pick three things, one would purely just be water. Two, if I had to pick because two would be having your own microphone. That's kind of one that I have to say more often than not, especially for some of my people in like various hardcore bands, more punk leaning bands and stuff like that, where people will rely on house equipment, not only just for sound but just for hygiene in general. Having your own mic is really important. And number three, not even a physical thing, just patience. And that patience is the same kind of thing that I'll have people think about when it comes to progression or and progress, like in the gym or with their own bodies and physicality, same way as they'll feel about their voice, either training for a tour or when they're on the tour itself, or if they're getting ready to do an album, trying to really level up everything that they're doing. Having a certain level of patience is really, really crucial. And I know that because I've tried to do all of this without patience before, and it didn't go very well. So as soon as I implemented so many of these different things and really focused on just kind of the bare essentials like this and looking at this job for what it actually is, it made all the difference in the world. So, water, your own microphone, patience.
Patience. All right. So I've heard a lot of vocalists talk about like throat coat tea and then
Mm-hmm.
like drops and like stuff like that. Like, are those things, would those things help them not get sick or keep them, performing at that high level? Is there anything like that that you would recommend that they take with them on tour?
To break that down, and it's cool because I haven't actually been asked that question formerly in an interview before. This is cool. When it comes to like things like all the different teas and lozenges and drops that you can use as a vocalist, those things are great in terms of being able to soothe the throat and making sure that they can undo tension and things like that. And a lot of those things are the most helpful after you're done vocalizing for the day, not before. And the
That's good to know.
reason for that, I'll break down, is because of what those things are, for the most part, actually doing. And all of them have different ingredients, and a lot of different products say that they do different things. But when at the end of the day, it's really about making sure that you're managing the way the vocal is being done in the moment. When it comes to the actual vocalizing, for a lot of people, say like on tour or in the studio, kind of wherever, there's a lot of moments where a lot of extra air can get used while we're vocalizing, and that extra air kind of escaping around the vocal, not getting used for anything, is the biggest factor in creating feelings of tension and feelings of kind of being dried out, dehydrated, that kind of itchy, scratchy feeling that can lead to inflammation. And even a little bit of that on one day, if that's not resolved, and if you keep vocalizing the same way, that adds up the next day and the next day and the next day. And that's where things start to get rough for a lot of people on tour. Where all these teas and lozenges and other things come in is that it helps to soothe any sort of irritated tissue. And if you're going
Mm.
from feeling that sense of irritation to feeling relief, that can make all the difference in the world if you feel like that's what's happening for you, and then you can go out there and kind of do your thing. The problem with leaning a lot on these supplemental things is, for many that don't know this or aren't having this conversation with someone like me or otherwise, is that they then don't ever fix the reason why their throat was getting irritated in the first place, because they don't know. And it's kind of putting a band aid on something. Whereas if the focus was on making sure that the vocalizing wasn't creating that irritation in the first place, then all these different kinds of products and these things that can help to soothe muscle and relax things become really great for after set. Because even like just like with any kind of workout, any sort of athletics, any sort of like vocalizing of any kind, not even just the extreme vocals we're talking about here, at the end of a set, even if you're doing it really well, that doesn't mean you did nothing. We still broke down muscle tissue, we still used a lot of energy, we still used a lot of resources. So using some of these teas, some of these lozenges after set can be really nice to kind of just help calm the muscles down and make it so that for the rest of the evening you're not carrying yourself in that hyper depleted state. And if anything, what I recommend to people most, especially because when I'm working with, let's say, people that are just starting out that don't have the finances to buy just endless amounts of these kind of vocal specific products, eating something some like more balanced and more like vitamin rich after set, something small, something nutritious, like all the way down to like have like a handful of berries after set, or grapes or anything like that, anything to start to replenish things and rehydrate, can jumpstart that healing process and that rebuilding process in the muscle tissue and make it so that you can have a way better reset than many other things can that are more so designed to soothe and to make you feel good. And that's not to say to anyone that loves these things, like, don't use them, because I work with plenty of people that love these things, and especially if they're using them before set, they feel like it's making a big difference. And if it's helping them do their job, then I'm not going to stop them from doing that. But at the end of the day, it's really, really best to kind of focus on using these things after the fact, not before.
Yeah, and I see like the same thing happening in like within the gym setting, because you can keep doing, shitty form, and then you're not really doing mobility and stuff like that, and then you just keep doing the wrong things, and then you build these incorrect patterns, which like eventually will just fuck you up. But if you're doing it wrong and then you're adding, oh, I just need creatine and then everything's going to be okay, or I just need like straps and then I'm going to be okay, you add all these extra things, but you're not taking care of the real issue, the root cause of it, then you're just going downhill. So it makes sense.
Exactly. Yeah. So I like, and that's so much of how I teach too. Like, I work on making sure everyone's form is there first, like before ever kind of recommending anything else, because it all starts here. It all starts with you.
Yeah, perfect. So you've spoken a little bit about diet now, and just kind of get into that a little bit more. We all know that there is a struggle to eat well on tour because there's just access to crap, basically. What
Yes.
advice do you have, like for vocalists, or I mean musicians in general on tour? How do they manage their diet to make sure that they're not, eating badly?
If you aren't able to bring your own food with you, something that is now more than ever very easy to do is just research where you're going to be ahead of time. Like look, like even like the night before, look at what food options are available, like in and around the area of the show you're playing. Like, is there anywhere that you can get something that's not necessarily like only fried or like only sugary things? Is there anywhere nearby? Is there a grocery store nearby where you can grab anything that's just ready to go? If you're playing a show where they're feeding you that day, if there's catering that day, are there some healthier options than not? And how can you make some of these better decisions for yourself? If you are traveling in something that does have a fridge, like for us in Renaissance, like I'm pretty adamant about being able to travel in a way where I have access to a fridge and a kitchen in our touring vehicle. So I'll regularly cook for myself and make sure that I'm balancing that out, like what's actually in there component wise, as best as possible. If you're the kind of band that has a rider, put healthier things on it. We and our rider for us is pretty standard, but I include a veggie tray in there, like making sure to get a big, like very balanced vegetable tray in there, and that'll take care of different things on that front for a good number of days on tour. And even if you don't have access to a fridge, if let's say if you're touring in a van, it's very possible if you're going to prioritize this to somehow make space in your own area to put a small cooler and have different things for yourself that you can make cold. Or even like when I was a kid first starting out touring, I kind of grew up in the world that it was so punk rock at the time. Like get like very like camping kind of mentality. Make sure you have like non-perishable things with you, things
Hmm.
that don't need to be refrigerated, things that can just last, and just a couple of them, and be able to fashion that into whatever meals you need during the day. So you're not necessarily having to just buy out over and over and over again, especially if there aren't really any options depending on where you're playing. The big thing
Hmm.
is if you prioritize it, there's definitely always a way to be able to get the nutrition you need while out on the road. And that does mean fighting temptation a little bit. And because I'm definitely someone that also is a big advocate for letting yourself live your life, it's not necessarily for me or with the people I'm training about trying to very strictly only eat very clean, depending on what the goals are and depending on what that person wants. But it's trying to really prioritize the nutrition and prioritize like the schedule of the eating as well to make sure that you're setting yourself up for success.
Yeah, just being aware makes such a difference, right?
Big time.
Yeah. So, what would you say are the three things that would absolutely wreck a vocalist's voice during tour? What should they generally avoid?
Biggest things that would like wreck someone's voice based on what we were just talking about is just not eating well, because with that in mind, like you're not rebuilding properly, you don't have what you need. Not sleeping, and although that's definitely tough in a touring environment because sleep can be so erratic, it's not even necessarily about trying to sleep very well. It's just, even if you're only getting like 5 hours a day, you can make that beneficial for yourself, rebuilding wise, if you try your best to keep those sleeping hours around the same times every day.
Hard.
Like for me, even though like our touring schedule is definitely very chaotic, the days are very chaotic. A lot of us are working multiple different positions on tour. For me, regardless of what time we leave a venue and regardless of if we're driving at night or if we're having to do anything else afterwards, I typically go to sleep around 4 or 4:30 a.m. every day, like no matter what, and wake up probably around 10 or 11, something like that. And the circumstances are constantly changing and we're always in different places, and that's true for every band out there. But by trying to like kind of keep myself on that schedule no matter what, and just knowing that everything's going to be chaos, so just shifting it into later in the day, I'm able to feel like I'm getting that vocal recovery every day. And then lastly, the last thing that really kind of hurts people the most on tour isn't even what they're doing on stage, it's what they're doing off stage. And it's the way that they're talking. Not talking in general, but just like the way speaking is happening, especially after set. Like if people are in louder, more party like environments, like if people are going out to a bar or a restaurant or something, or if people are just playing loud music, or if people are hanging out like during the rest of the show, just trying to exist and talk over the loud music, trying to like really like throw your voice is one of the things that really does the most damage, especially when you're in that depleted state, if you're also not recovering and if you're also not refueling. So, and even with that, it's a quick fix. I don't tell people to just necessarily like go hide in a hole like for an entire tour and like don't speak to anybody and then only use your voice on stage. What I have people do is just raise their voice a little higher, just a little bit. Not in such a way where it sounds like they're speaking really, really high, but kind of letting it sit on top of, let's say, where they would normally sit if their voice was feeling a little tired or if they were feeling a little low energy. By adding just that little bit of, I'm going to say, enthusiasm, it makes it so you're able to project more naturally because those higher sounds are going to travel forward with more intensity than lower sounds, and that'll make it so people can hear you better in those louder environments without you having to like shout or really squeeze the voice to get that out.
That is such a freaking good tip. Like, I'm going to steal that.
Oh, it makes a huge difference. And because I'm having to interact with so many people during the day, and because I love to just interact with our own fans after a show, or even if I've just done guest vocals with another band that I work with, I'll go out and meet people, I'll shake hands, I'll take pictures, I'll do the whole thing, and I'll hear so many stories and have so many amazing conversations. And the only reason I'm still able to do my job and do this day in and day out is because I'll bring my voice into that zone, and even now, like when I'm talking to you, kind of exist in that zone so that I'm not letting myself like slip down into like say here and keeping my voice like more or less booted down all the time, because that's where a lot of that strain would come from.
Yeah. Yeah. That's so cool. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, let's say your voice is shot. What would you do on tour? You're all messed up now, but what do you do to recover from that?
If I wake up one day and I can tell my voice is in not great shape, that is where I will start to implement like more vocal rest during the day, maybe say more than usual. Not necessarily like full like don't talk to anybody, because you need to use your voice to a degree before getting up on stage. Similarly, like to if you're going to have a big lift day in the gym, even if you're going for more of like a one rep max kind of thing, that doesn't mean you don't warm up. Even if you're using the strategy of trying to get that weight up a lot sooner within that workout to try to activate more of that like just chemical response in the body to make it so that you are like forcing more muscle growth in that moment, that doesn't mean you don't warm up, and that doesn't mean you go cold. And it especially is worse if you're literally just stationary the entire day. There needs to be some level of movement to make it so that you're able to do the job and do the job as best as you can when you enter this environment. And that's That's exactly the same for vocals, and that's exactly the same for being on tour. If I know it's really bad, this is where I'll do things where, like, if I have access to a hot shower, I'll go in there and just kind of let myself steam, try to
Mm.
relax things in my throat as best as I can. If I can sense, let's say it's coming from like allergies, and there's a lot of like residual tension just from allergies, I'll make sure that I start some sort of allergy medication that day. If I'm sick or if I feel like I'm getting sick, I'll do my best to get somewhere to be able to get help, to be able to deal with that as quickly as possible and try to figure out what condition I'm in. Because if I get really sick or if someone else gets really, really sick, there is such a thing as having something that's progressed to a certain point where there kind of isn't a way to just push through that.
Mm.
So it's being able to get enough information, test things out enough to be able to evaluate for yourself if it's going to be worse to try to push through than it would be to just wait. Canceling a show is something no one ever wants to do, and I've actually never had to do that when it comes to things with my voice. And I know the day will happen someday, and I'm going to do my best to make sure it doesn't, or it's not for a long time. But I know that's something that happens for a lot of people and a lot of friends of mine too. And sometimes if you just get sick, there kind of isn't anything you can do.
Mm.
But depending on the circumstances, like even if it's just a cold, if it's allergies, if it's feeling rough, the biggest thing is just kind of scaling the amount of work that's being done on stage. Let's say, similarly, like if I wanted to work out one day, but I'm feeling really shot, just really low energy, like, oh, I really don't want to go, or like I'm feeling like ultra sore today, or maybe I'm coming down with something. If you just let yourself do a little bit, or like work out with a little bit less intensity, you can help to maintain where you're at without
Mm.
necessarily like losing that day of progress. That being said, naturally, not working out for one day isn't actually losing progress. That's more for how we feel in
Yeah.
here more than anything
Yeah.
else. But when vocalizing is your job and it's something you need to do, and because of what you're doing, it's a lot of other people's jobs revolving around what you do as well. Of course, the pressure is on to try to get through it. And when I'm working with people on tour that are not doing super well, like that's a lot of what will happen for me. Like I'll get kind of an emergency call from somebody, like dealing with something the day of a show, and I'll be doing my best to help kind of reorient their voice through different exercises to help soothe tension, to help kind of with different things that I've borrowed, honestly, from this world of stuff with the body and like physicality, being able to try to get the vocal cords, get the vocal tract moving in a more efficient way that's not requiring as much energy, and then being able to use what we know throughout the set, but without having to use nearly as much output, and leaning a little more on letting the microphone do the work for you, letting your body
Mm.
language do the work for you. And in my line of work, like 8 or 9 times out of 10, that's enough to be able to get people through the set and get people feeling a lot better than they thought they would have. Because a lot of times when people are waking up and feeling that kind of sensation, a lot of times it's more tension than anything else that's built up. So being able to resolve that, being able to deal with that, work around it, work through it can make all the difference in the world.
Love that. So it's not just listening to your body. I mean, that's important, but
Oh,
there's
yeah.
also a lot of little techniques that you've shared here that can help that situation get better. That's awesome. I want to go back to what you said about like when you have some kind of thing coming on where you feel like you're getting sick or something, you shouldn't just not do anything. I remember because when I had like a back injury, my physiotherapist was like, the worst thing you can do is just sit and do nothing because your body was made to move. So you can't, you have to get it in that you get the blood flow going and get your body to understand that that's not, you don't have to sit down in one place. We're meant to move. So that's normal.
Exactly. Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. And that movement is so crucial. And especially when I'm like, let's say if I'm working with someone new that I don't know and I kind of start to notice that there's someone that's definitely more stationary during the day, I'm very careful with how I do this, but I start to kind of encourage different amounts of movement during the day, I start to kind of like invite people into different things and then gradually kind of shift the mindset into making sure that there is that amount of movement during the day. And then that leads into what you just said, like opening yourself up to listening to your body more often, more regularly. And that comes down to like if there is something medical, like making sure that you stay on top of it and you know what kind of condition you're in as opposed to just kind of guessing.
Yeah, makes sense. So, what is your take on alcohol and that the impact of that on vocals?
That can definitely change depending on who you are. And even though, like, for a lot of people on tour, especially, like, I will be a big advocate for, like, I'm not going to, like, tell you to, like, restrict anything. Because, especially very often, like, when you tell someone to not do something, they tend to do the exact opposite.
Yeah.
like a couple drinks on a day if you're a touring band or if you're a vocalist isn't going to be the end of the world, but it is definitely going to affect things in some way. Even if you're someone whose body doesn't like react that much to it, there is that difference in muscle responsiveness. There is that difference in attention to detail. There is that difference in just like the sharpness of the mind and the sharpness of our control center for everything. So even if it doesn't feel like it is influencing our decisions and it's influencing movement. And even though there's been lots of studies done that show that depending on how much of any sort of thing like that alcohol wise you're having, the amount of water also involved in different things like that, depending on what it is, ends up canceling out a lot of those more dehydrating elements to the point where like you would have to drink a lot of something to actually dehydrate yourself faster than whatever like the water content of something is. Granted, if you're just like doing endless shots, that's not good. There's no water there, and that's a surefire way to just have a bad time, even just in terms of like the corrosiveness of things. I just, and it's funny you mentioned this. I've been on a bit of a break. I've been on a bit of a break from alcohol for, I think technically, like now, like just about a month. But then even like the month before that, I was kind of getting more into that. And even though like I don't drink to like get drunk or anything like that or anything like that, even close. And I don't really feel the effects of different things when I'm doing that because it's definitely more for flavor and more of a social thing when I have. I definitely feel a difference when I'm not doing it vocally. I can definitely feel more control. I definitely feel like I have more in the tank. And it definitely
Mm.
does make a difference. And although I tell people to like live their lives, practice moderation is more importantly what I do for everybody, making sure that everything, although you can live, has a limit. Like during a day, like before a set, two, maybe like if it's someone where I'm having a bit of a tough time like steering them away from it, like three tops, like throughout the entire day before a performance, not like right before, because that would be insane. But like at all kind of thing. But of course, just like with any sort of substance, any sort of thing like that, of course your voice and your body are going to operate better without it.
Mm. Yeah, and I know that alcohol can actually disrupt your sleep, which is so crucial when you're touring.
Mm-hmm. That too, for sure.
Yeah. Let's get into mindset then a little bit. So we're living in this world with this freaking constant distraction. Everyone has ADHD, right? So what advice do you have for musicians who are just trying to focus,
I
get
deal
into that
with
that state of like flow or whatever?
yeah, I deal with a lot of ADD as well, a lot of trouble focusing sometimes. And even though like, I'm very on top of what I do and I'm very organized with what I do and very detail oriented, like there's a lot of back and forthing. Like any sort of day as a vocalist, as someone in a band, and that can be really, really tough. Or even if you're just someone at home trying to dedicate yourself to learning this, it's really easy to get distracted by things, like you said, because everything that we deal with now in modern day society is almost like catered to kind of lend to that rather than like helping to work against it. The biggest thing that I try to do, especially on tour, is as a musician, as a business owner, so much of what we do on our phones, so much of social media is really important. And I'll do as much of that as I need to within different things, and then I'll put it down, I'll put it away. I've taken it to the point where, and you don't have to do this. I've actually, like, with different social media apps on my phone, I've set different, like the parental alarm, like the parental kind of locks on them, where it will allow for like a specific like, amount of time, like 15 minutes, and then it will lock itself. Like the app will lock itself. And even though like all I have to do is press a few buttons to get back in, it makes it just inconvenient enough where if it locks, I don't want to deal with it. So if I hit that time limit, I'm just like, I'm just going to put my phone down. And that makes a big difference.
That's
I
a
recently,
reminder.
I recently spoke in a video of mine with Danny Filth from Cradle of Filth about some things like that. And he is a big advocate for like journaling on tour. And I know a lot of other people that are really into that and just kind of like taking that moment to kind of be centered with yourself and just like write down your thoughts, write down how you're feeling, write down what happened that day. And I've kind of encouraged some other people in my camp to get into that as well. I've gotten a lot more into that, and just the act of kind of having that separate alone time, writing things down, has been really important. Making sure to have time to like separate and kind of disconnect, almost like just like meditating during the day, is really important. We have people in our camp that will do that. I'll help a lot of other people get into that as well in the touring world, and even for myself, I'll before I start getting ready for set, I'll just set aside 10 minutes to just kind of sit in the dark, just sit in silence, just not think about anything, and just let myself reset. And I definitely feel a lot more focused because of
Mm.
those things. So, a big part of talking about mindset and what you're asking me here about kind of dealing with distractions during the day is, I guess, just kind of going into what you're doing with the mindset of being able to decide how you want things to go. Same thing with any sort of like dedication that one will make to whatever their sport is, or whatever kind of training they're doing in the gym, whatever program they're trying to follow. The big thing is just summoning up that willpower to just decide that you're going to go after something and decide that it's important to you. And whether that's big changes or small changes, it makes a really big difference.
Love that. Love that. So in the creative space, we've got, this people are just constantly battling in their minds that they're not good enough. There's this imposter syndrome, especially with social media. You go on there and there's everyone's just doing a wonderful job except for you. And then it takes like 30 seconds for you to feel like shit about yourself, right?
Yeah.
So if you're not careful, right? So what advice do you have for someone to just silence and then overcome that negative voice? This
It's
is the
kind of
last
like I
question.
said, it's kind of like I said earlier, what that made me really excited, the fact that like everyone's story is so different, everyone's voice is so different, everyone's body is so different. To that extent, when you expand on that, like everyone's lives are different, everyone's story is different, everyone's background is different, and what everyone's after is different. So, a big thing that I put in people's heads, like even on the vocal front, when I'm starting to train someone that's just starting out, or even if it's somebody that's been doing their thing for sometimes longer than I've been alive, what I'll say is don't compare. Like comparison is definitely like a killer of joy in this kind of regard, or in any regard, especially like with what you said with how social media, especially like I'll see so much of that now because I do look into this like in terms of like what, let's say, like different beauty standards are, or what strength standards are, what size standards are, and how that changes every 3 minutes. And more or less what that is, like seeing a lot of like either influencers or other people just pushing like that, oh, everything's perfect mentality all the time. It's really easy to look at that and be like, oh, I'm never going to be where that person is because I don't have what they have, or I don't look how they look, or I don't sound how they sound. And that can definitely be really discouraging unless you kind of separate that and really look at your own strong suits, cultivate those, expand on what that means, and then kind of just invest more in yourself more than you're investing in what other people are doing.
Yeah, I love that. And a lot of people fail to understand that it's just everyone's highlight reel being posted, right? They're not really they're not really putting out stuff that's the reality of what they're going through, but they'll just post the best things on there, and then people think that's everything,
Oh
right?
yeah, for sure. And the biggest thing is like even though like so much of what we do and so much of what's happened for us is because of social media, and I am very thankful to social media for that and for being able to have a platform to be able to help people all over the world with their voices, and by extension have so many people even know who I am or care at all about what I'm doing and my own band and my own music. And that's an incredible gift that we have in this day and age because of that. But there is that other side of it where it's just understanding that the social media element isn't totally real.
Yeah,
Like even
totally.
for me, I don't put like every detail of my personal life into my social media because that's not the point. I don't have to. I'll use it to help people. I'll use it to tell people what we're doing and what's happening and what I'm passionate about, and then I'll put it away because that's it's about kind of sharing what you want to share.
Yeah, yeah, that's so true. Yeah, that's so true. Totally agree. So I just wanted to touch on one last thing, and that's that people get stuck in their lives and then they don't make progress, and then they feel bad, and then they kind of think that's not for me. I don't want to move ahead. But getting a coach can actually, someone had this really good analogy, and I can't remember who it was, that you can spend years of your life punching a wall, and then you don't, punch through that. And you get a coach, which is kind of like a hammer, and then you just freaking smash that wall, right? And then you get to that next level. So, can you tell us a little bit like about your how you help people kind of get to that next level as a coach?
I've had a lot of really great mentors in my life, like whether it's been like different voice specialists I've worked with, like different people in touring worlds that I've worked with, or especially with what we're talking about here, like I've had great coaches in terms of like bodybuilding, powerlifting, like anything in the gym, and I've taken so much of this kind of mentality to heart, and I incorporate so much of what I learned then when I was doing all of that into the way I teach now. And the one of the biggest things is that, and I push this with my students, and it's that gradual progress is really hard to track. Like it's really hard to know when you are progressing if it's in these little baby steps, and it's really easy for people to get discouraged with that, whether it's about strength or it's about size or it's about vocal ability and how you sound and what you're able to do or not do in some cases. And that can frustrate a lot of people, especially in the current environment we live in where so much of culture has shifted to be around just instant gratification. And with that in mind, like people will kind of get discouraged, like, oh, like I didn't get something right away. So either that's not for me, or like I'm just going to be really frustrated and do something else kind of thing. And that's why I implement so much about patience and being able to track your progress in other ways. Like film a little bit of yourself practicing every day. Show someone else a little bit of what you're doing every day. Create a way to be able to kind of compare even on a day-to-day, week-to-week basis. Like it's tough when it feels like you're stuck or like, and I know this is a big thing in any sort of like athletics and physicality, that feeling of plateauing can be really really damaging, like to the mind, and really damaging to like how we feel about different things like this. But when we get to the point where it's like, oh, I now have something to compare myself to. If you recorded yourself practicing like every day for a few weeks, if you look at where you are one day and then compare that to a few weeks ago, even though you don't feel any different, you'll listen and go, oh, now that I actually have a direct comparison, like, oh, I'm noticing all these different things. And as a coach, even though I can notice those gradual progress things, and any sort of like fitness coach, any sort of trainer is going to notice those gradual things. When someone else who isn't an expert is working on different stuff, it's really hard to notice the progress when you are actively the one doing it. So having these conversations with a coach, with a professional, even just with a friend, and getting a second opinion is really important. And being able to get that external point of view, even if you're having to create that external point of view yourself.
Yeah, I love that. There's this thing called the messy middle, right? Where you're not at the start, where you're just starting your journey and you're not there, you don't have that feeling of achievement yet. You're somewhere there in the middle and it's messy and you're just like, I don't know if I'm doing the right thing. And that's where coaches like you come in and kind of make that difference, because there's other eyes looking at you now, telling you where you're fucking up, what you can do better. And you stop growing, when you stop learning, basically. So yeah.
That, and like it's the fact that like people will set big goals for themselves, not realizing that there's lots of really great goals and checkpoints to celebrate along the way. And it's really easy to feel like, oh, I'm just going through this learning process forever. I'm never going to get to where I want to be. And they're kind of not realizing how many amazing things they're accomplishing all along the way. So a big thing I do, and any good coach, any good trainer will also do, is break down what those little victories are along the way so that you can feel good about what it is you're doing the whole time. And that's a huge thing, not just about the enjoyment of what it is we're after and the enjoyment of like what the act of vocalizing or like fitness is itself, but the act of working on yourself should be equally as enjoyable. And that's something I learned a lot in Next Level and when I was doing all of this fitness stuff is never forgetting the joy factor is, if anything, the most important element of all of this.
Yeah. All right. Thanks so much for sharing all of that. I think it's going to be extremely helpful to everyone. So we're done with the questions. Is there anything else you want to add?
I love being able to incorporate like physicality and different elements of understanding the body and understanding physical training so much into what I do as a vocalist myself, being in a touring band myself, being a vocal coach, and being able to help everyone else with that too, and really just increasing that mind to body connection. And this was a really cool, really interesting conversation about things that I don't typically always get to talk about. So thank you for having me, and thanks for letting me kind of rant about some of these things that I'm definitely also very passionate about.
My pleasure. All right. So I'll put your Instagram handle and YouTube handle there and also in the description. Where can everyone catch you live next?
Next, we are gearing up for the Road to Warp Tour this weekend. We're playing in Scranton, Pennsylvania, and that is on the main stage that we're opening along with our friends in Escape the Fate. And we've also got It Dies Today and Scary Kids, Scaring Kids, and so many more too. We're really looking forward to that and looking forward to the rest of the year as well, because Renaissance is going really hard. I'm going to be all over the place coaching as always as well. And like you asked, you can find both Extreme Vocal Institute, my band Renaissance, and myself, David Benitez, all over the place on social media as well.
You've taken over. All right. I'll put all your links there in the description so people can find you. And thanks again.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me today.